In today's episode of the Part Filipino Podcast, I'm going to be talking about how to identify yourself as a person of part heritage. I'll also be talking about some of the confusion that can exist as a person of mixed race or mixed heritage, in my case, part Filipino. There are basically two types of confusion. The first is an internal confusion, or the question of, who am I?
Who am I? I don't know.
And the second is an external confusion, or the question of, who are you?
Who are you?
Who are you?
But one thing I'm never confused about is that there's nothing I like to snack on more than dried guyabano. Dried guyabano. Dried guyabano is naturally delicious and gluten-free. These guyabano treats are 100% indigenous to the 7,107 islands of the Philippines. Try dried guyabano today. Welcome to the Part Filipino Podcast, the podcast for people who aren't quite sure if they actually count as Filipino. My name is Leland Fox, and I'm half Filipino. I hope you'll join me as I explore what it means to be part Filipino. The truth be told, I've actually never tried this before, so I am going to give it a try here, live before my studio audience. So let's see how this goes. Sugary. I don't know how to explain it other than tastes like a nice sweet dried fruit, maybe like a more mild pineapple. That's probably what I say, a more mild dried pineapple flavor. It kind of looks like these things they have in New Zealand called feijoa. Similar to that too, I guess. It's good, but not as good as dried mangoes. Dried mangoes are way better. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk today about the serious issue of being part Filipino. And to do that, I want to turn to some comments that I received. I've mentioned this before, but when I first started this, I was kind of concerned if I would get a ton of troll comments, and I don't really get that. I think I've only gotten 3 comments that I've thought were kind of trollish, but everyone else's comments seem to be adding to the conversation and are just mostly really supportive. And I got to say that I'm way further along the road than I thought I would be at this point, with the number of people that are contributing, with the number of subscribers, with how many people are watching and participating in this program that I put together. I thought it'd at least take a year to be where I am today. And so everyone has been so great so far. But I did want to take a look at a few of these comments and just take a moment to reflect on my mixed race experience and where I am today. So the first comment is from Glee Rivera 4019, who says, "No such thing as part Filipino. All are family. White, black, brown." Linda Guyan 4490 says, "I agree. It doesn't matter whether you are part Filipino, you are Filipino." Wo Gook Bun says, "You are not half of anything, brother. Your mother's genome was 99.99% identical to your father's genome, so you can fully claim both." Eric V. Hoy says, "If you believe in your heart that you are a Filipino, it doesn't matter if you're part Filipino or quarter Filipino. You are Filipino." And then this next comment is the one that I use for my thumbnail. This person says, "Stop quantifying yourself. If you're proud of your heritage, then just say you're Filipino. Be proud to be Pinoy if that's what you want." And I think that's actually a good question. What do I want? Because I definitely like these types of comments that are supportive and welcoming. But there's still a part of me that doesn't necessarily understand how this works, because I actually am half Filipino. And since the point of this program is to really explore what it means to be part Filipino, I feel like this is a question I have to address. How does the fact that I am part Filipino fit into all of this? I actually think it's a challenging question to work through. And I actually posted about this on my private Facebook that I was doing this project, and one of my friends, my wife's college roommate, who's half Japanese, said this. That is, it's the plight of every multiracial person I know. Never enough to fit anywhere. And it's kind of true. There's some sort of confusion that plays into it. And as I said in the intro, I find it to be an internal confusion and an external confusion. And when I was researching about this on the internet, I came across an article about the biracial identity crisis. It's actually by a student from Cal State and Monterey Bay named Layla Norwood. And I want to just go ahead and read her experience because I think it's a good illustration of what the biracial identity crisis looks and feels like. And I'm going to try and do this in an artsy way, so bear with me here. A biracial identity crisis is when a person who identifies as more than one race feels as if they are not enough of one race, or that they believe they have to pick a side, or they don't feel like they can identify as either because in society's eyes, they're not enough. I felt as if I had to identify as Black or Middle Eastern, but never both. Growing up, I was teased by the African American students because they did not believe that I was Black enough. I had a slight accent because English wasn't my first language, and my hair looked different from theirs. They didn't like that. So I tried to erase that part of me as a whole. I tried identifying myself as Middle Eastern only, which was difficult because you wouldn't know that I'm Middle Eastern unless I brought it up myself. In fact, a lot of people assumed I was Mexican, which was fine with me because it was better than feeling like I wasn't Black or Middle Eastern enough. My parents didn't help my identity crisis issue either. They would always argue, and my dad would say, "You are just Black. The world will only view you as Black." But my mom would always tell me, "You are Arab, so act like it." They wouldn't acknowledge that I was both Middle Eastern and Black. It took many years of self-searching to realize that everyone was wrong. I am both. I am African American and Middle Eastern. I relate to that story in a couple of ways. For example, when she starts to talk about how no one would know she was Middle Eastern unless she brought it up, that's totally been my experience. If I don't tell people that I'm half Filipino, most people would just think, I'm just a white guy. In fact, I served an LDS mission here in Seattle, and I used to have to keep missionaries will wear those name badges. I used to have to keep a picture of my family stuck onto that back of that name badge, because if I said I was half Filipino, people would be like, "No way," and I'd be like, "Yeah, I am. Like, here's my family." And then when they saw me in context with my family, they'd be like, "Okay, yeah, I guess I see it." So I get that part. And I also get the part of being confused for being Mexican from time to time. In fact, when my wife first met me, she thought I was Mexican. But that being said, I wouldn't ever say that I experienced a biracial identity crisis. To me, that word is a little bit too strong. I'd say that I've maybe had some confusion. But I've always thought that it was really cool that I was half Filipino. But I've also never really dwelt on what that means, especially when I was younger. I just always thought of myself as an American who happens to be half Filipino, which is really cool. It really wasn't until I started getting older and my kids started getting older where I started thinking, man, if I don't do something to make the Philippines more integrated into our family and into our lives, then that whole heritage has a chance of being lost because we just don't really do much for it. And so that's when I thought I better start trying to figure out what it means, what it really means to have a part Filipino heritage. And interestingly enough, my personal journey actually matches up pretty well with a development pattern called the Poson Biracial Identity Development Model, which has 5 stages, which I will go over with you. Stage 1 is personal identity. This is basically when you're a child and you're not aware that you have a mixed heritage. And so all you have is just knowing that you're you. Stage 2 is the choice of group or categorization. And this is feeling pressured into choosing one racial or ethnic identity over another due to social, economic, or physical issues. And at the beginning of this episode, when I talk about there being internal and external confusion, to me, this stage 2 is that there are external forces that are basically telling you what you are. This is creating external confusion. Stage 3 is enmeshment or denial, and enmeshment is just entanglement, and so kind of by definition this is confusion. So stage 1 is just not knowing, stage 2 is basically being assigned a race identity, and stage 3 is you being confused about what the heck just happened, and then you have to figure out how to untangle all of this. So to me, this is internal confusion. In my case, it might be I'm feeling guilty about not being more Filipino. I didn't really experience that as a child, but as I mentioned, as I got older and had my own kids, I probably would say that's a fair description of my own internal confusion, saying, well, why am I not doing that? Stage 4 is appreciation, and this is where you explore the non-selected group and grow to appreciate it. And that's really why I started this project, was to try and learn more about the Philippines and learn to appreciate it more. And it's been working. This has been great. And stage 5 is integration, which is a sense of wholeness and learning to integrate your multiple identities together. And that's something we've been doing with things that my family's been learning about the Philippines. And I mentioned how we did a Filipino style debut for my daughter. And just when we learn things that we like, we try to bring them into our family. So those are the 5 stages. There's also another model called the Continuum of Biracial Identity, or the COBI model. And this one, where the last model kind of said there are 5 stages and is ultimately leading you to that 5th stage, which is integration and appreciation of both your cultures and ethnicities. The COBI model says, well, it's possible that you can choose just one, or you can choose to totally blend them, say 50-50. There's a continuum there, and whichever one you choose that works for you, that's the right thing for you, there's no wrong choice. And so the COBI model just reflects that. So those are the models that relate to trying to resolve this confusion of biracial identity. Now, I guess my question for you out there would be, is knowing these models particularly helpful? For me, I'd say the most helpful thing is just knowing that you're not alone, that you're not the only one experiencing, again, I'm not going to say crisis, but at least maybe some confusion, and trying to understand how you fit into the spectrum of being a mixed heritage person. So I guess to round out the story arc of this episode, if I had to pick where I am on the stages of this model, this biracial integration model, I'd say I'm emerging from stage 3, which is enmeshment, and I'm in stage 4, heading more towards stage 5, which is integration. But to kind of answer the question of, should I stop quantifying myself as a part Filipino or as half Filipino, right now I'm going to say my answer is no, because that is how I identify myself, as half Filipino and half Caucasian. This program obviously is all about my Filipino connection and learning about the Philippines, but I'm also very proud of my paternal side of my heritage, which is very much European. In fact, as I record this today, it's November 5th, 2024, which happens to be Guy Fawkes Day, and one of my ancestors is Guy Fawkes, the infamous conspirator who tried to blow up British Parliament. So on my dad's side of the family, we have Guy Fawkes, who was drawn and quartered for treason. And in my interview with my mom, I learned that my great-great-grandfather was beheaded for essentially treason, or I guess more specifically, sympathizing with the Japanese. So I'm hoping these types of fates aren't hereditary, but my point is that I do identify with both sides of my heritage, and so I am comfortable with identifying myself as part or half Filipino. And on that note, I'm going to share one last comment from someone on YouTube. Ed Breen 8394 says, "Just found your vlog and subscribed. I found your daughter's story interesting. Interviewed my daughter, who's quarter Filipino. My wife is a Filipina, and we have 2 half Filipino adult children. Each have 3 daughters, with 3 being quarter Filipina and 3 being half Filipina, as our mother is also half Filipina. I shared your vlog with them, so hopefully they will enjoy as well. And if you know someone who is part Filipino, share this with them as well. I'd be curious to know what their experience has been being a part Filipino and navigating these types of models. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Part Filipino podcast. I hope I'll catch you on the next one. See ya.